So in the previous session, Coterie briefly entered Bristol to regroup and report their findings to Prince Kincaid, learning the events in York had reignited the fire of the church, with threats of a new inquisition coming to the British Isles. Their new companion, Katya, insisted on leaving urgently. And the group ultimately returned back to the road, arriving in London around December 1456. London is rife with unrest, homes being invaded on suspicion of heresy and witchcraft, and other such devilry. The city is tense. Feeding is more dangerous than it has been in over a century. And there is still looming threat of the Mercers and the Anarch Rebellion. So the scene opens to Argyle, whom I recall was seeking Elysium.
He was going to see about touching base with a contact first and then do Elysium, but either way is fine.
Sure. Which contact did Argyle want to speak with first?
Checking my notes for London.
Check.
There's a ferryman across the Thames named John.
John the ferryman who works the Thames. All right. So you wind your way through the cold streets of London past the crowds. You see again patrols of guards, often led by priests, all of them wielding torches in their hands, townspeople giving them a wide berth as the guards eye them up and down. And distrust and suspicion is palpable. No one trusts anyone. You descend the road toward the boardwalk. And eventually come across a strip of the docks that you know you've met John, this ferryman, in the past. You can see he has relatively small ship, smaller than a cog, docked and pulled in, tied up with rope to one of the dock posts. It looks like he's just doing some maintenance on the ship, moving some crates. When you start to approach, the creak of your wood gives you a creak of the wood that you walk on gives you away, and he turns to look at you as he wipes away the sweat on his brow. Hey, Olgar, what are you doing over here?
Oh, you know me. How goes the struggle, you old shite?
Oh, worse than ever, mate. It's getting pretty bad in this city. I don't know if you've been here very long, but I don't know, my old grandpappy used to tell me at times similar to this. But didn't sound quite as bad. That's what I'm seeing.
Hey, some of the old stories don't seem quite so bad until you see them yourself.
Well, it's not hurt the trade any, at least. People just need to ferry across. Not wanting to move through all that bridge nonsense.
Yeah, and moving a stack of crates on here is a damn sight easier than having a horse draw it. A bit cheaper too.
Aye. I'm faring. But I don't know. Try not to draw too much attention to myself. Attend church a few times more each week, more than I used to. He crosses himself.
Ah, that's wise. Well, I don't think you need to be worried so much about the witchcraft.
I'm as worried about the witchcraft as the people who think I might be doing witchcraft.
It seems to me some silken Turk caught a whiff of a second peasant uprising.
Don't know what that is. Didn't learn many books when I was growing.
Oh. Must have been 50 years ago or so, I'm told. Folks like you and me decided they'd had enough.
Hard to imagine that hadn't happened before. Well, with all the armies and the royal guards, I imagine they have quite a response for it all.
Yeah, they didn't have near as much response as they would have liked. From what I understand, more than a few flowery parlours went aflame.
It seems to be going that way now.
Oh, I don't know. The gentry still seem to get along quite well. I don't see these patrols up in the high class neighbours.
Oh, that's none of my business anyway. He tries to look down at his crates and goes back to moving them. What
Argyle will put his shoulder into the work as well.
what can I do for you?
Just thought I'd seek out a friendly face more than anything else. See if you can what's going on around here.
Well, you're right, they don't seem to be going up into the nicer parts of town. At least not yet. Plus, I don't know many people who could say to visit those streets.
Oh, I pass through. Where the watch can't see. That's rather pleasant. Quiet. No guards, no footmen. No priests dragging men and women out of their homes.
Don't much care if it's a rebellion or whatever they're gonna call it. I would just as much rather have my day go on as it always has. Whatever I gotta do to keep that roof over my shoulder, over my head,
Aye.
keep the food on my plate.
Aye, you're best to keep to yourself, but I worry for folks like you and me. How long before some footman has to drag his auntie up into the street for a confessor? Some seamstress meets the pyre. Or an apothecary gets flayed, you can?
Well, I don't know. He kind of scratches at the back of his head, nervously, anxiously. I just hope it doesn't happen to me.
You know a folk or two, yeah?
Sure. Few.
Maybe you keep to your own. Maybe you strengthen those bonds some. Up north of the wall, it was a clan that kept you alive.
Well, I've got my wife Mary, my 2 kids. My focus is on them. My friends, cousins. I hope them well. I hope them the best. But I can't be seen talking to the wrong people.
There's no wrong people. There's just more folk that earn their wage off the sweat of their brow and the strength of their back.
But you don't know
Maybe.
that. Some of them are the wrong people. Some of the people that they drag out, and they ask them, I ask him who else. I don't want to be pointed at.
The best way to do that is to get to know the folks around you. Chat up your neighbour. Share a pint with the fella at the bar.
I don't know, Argyle. I'm not as brave as you. I'm just a ferryman. That's it. I'm not a peasant's rebellion. I'm not anything.
No. You're a good man, John. Folks will see that. You just gotta show it. One good turn, after all.
I don't know. I just pray for myself and my family every night.
Hey, pray for your neighbour too. That's the Christian thing to do, after all.
Sure. Of course.
Maybe invite them to church with you.
I'll think about it. Thank you, Argyle.
You think about maybe making a few more friends that lives near you. All we can really do for ourselves is take care of our own.
He just kind of shrugs and loads up another pallet.
Argyle will stick around long enough to help finish loading the barge and then wish him a pleasant evening.
He waves to you and smiles weakly as he pushes off with the ferry. You can see his eyes look more tired than they have in the past.
Argyle would dismiss any suggestion that he be compensated for the help, instead just insisting that he pay it forward.
Where else would Argyle like to go to?
Well, now it would be Elysium.
Okay.
He's going to make sure he scrapes any lingering shite off the bottom of his boots before he steps inside, though.
Okay. So you return to the streets, ascending the road until you reach Seville Row, the long street most known for its tailors, and finally reaching the Seville Row Tailor, the business that also operates as the passage into the brothel below and the Elysium beneath that. It takes a lot of convincing by you to persuade the ghoul up top to allow you entrance even to the brothel, and a separate discussion entirely delays you further before he even admits there's a level below the brothel. Finally, you descend the steps after maybe half an hour after arriving. You pass through the cloth screen to London's Ballroom Elysium. The atmosphere here is a bit quieter than the handful of times you've been here in the past, but you're also not a regular, so it's kind of hard for you to say what the baseline activity should be. There are a good number of K-Knights in attendance. Some you recognize, some you don't. You do recognize Bella Matea near the center. She does seem to have a small cadre around her.
Not wishing to be rude, he'll give her a nod of deference and wait to see if she beckons him over.
Her eyes narrow as though trying to focus in on you, and perhaps some uncertainty as her head turns a bit sideways, still looking at you. Seems like perhaps she can't place your face.
He's going to, in that case, since she's not making a point of wanting to speak with him, and isn't objecting to his presence either, he'll see about, it looks like, is that Alexander Hitchcock I see there in portrait?
Yes, he is here.
Does he seem to be engaged in anything, or mostly just keeping his own company?
He's speaking to another individual you presume to be some Canaanite you've never heard of or seen. They're having a quiet discussion, standing off to the side by one of the walls. He gestures off into the distance once in a while, and doesn't seem to be a very animated discussion.
Argyle will do his best to catch Hitchcock's eye without interrupting his conversation.
You catch his eye, and he stops speaking to nod at you once briefly. There is a neutral expression on his face, but he seems to at least acknowledge you.
What about neonates hereabout, since nobody's going out of their way to make room for him or anything like that? He's got other plans in mind while he's here.
Are you looking for neonates you recognize, or just neonates in general?
Preferably preferably those that he recognizes, but any in particular is any of them is fine.
Yes, I will say that there is a coterie that you remember was on the rise the last time you were here, and you recognize Cecilia Gidry and her companions, a trio. They seem to be sitting around having a quiet discussion at a table off in one of the corners. Doesn't seem to be very private, just away.
Well, he's going to go park himself. He's not going to be presumptuous about it, but he is definitely going to meander in that direction.
Once you meander over close enough for this small coterie of neonates to notice you, Cecilia will look up and smile. Ah, Argyle. Good evening.
So far, so good. It's nice to see you're in good spirits and hale and hearty.
Yes, well, as fine as ever. We have had some success this year in developing some contacts, some big names, you see. Did you know the Gauntlet Lord Robert de Vere actually employed us this year?
Aye. Though I don't know that I'd be hanging my hat on that particular name, if you catch my drift.
She looks confused. Why is that?
Oh, I've just come from up York way. He's not exactly made the best reputation for himself.
Oh. Well, that's all the way in York. It's a crater as far as I'm concerned now, from what I hear.
Aye. 'Twas his hand did it.
What? What do you...
Well, not exactly. The story's a bit, shall we say, grey in areas. But from what I understand, he was the one that flipped the switch.
It must be hearsay, aimed at ruining his reputation.
You can go and ask the only remaining Gauntlet Lord left. She'll tell you.
She looks worried, and her other companions, these two other gentlemen, also look a bit concerned. Well, should I have the privilege, perhaps I will. Oh, well, I'm quite out of sorts now. She straightens out her dress.
Oh. A job well done's a job well done. It's not much matter who it's for.
Oh, but if it is true his reputation is so tarnished, we may have to start from the beginning.
His reputation's the least of his worries at this point. You might say he's beyond worldly concerns.
She looks even more concerned at that. Oh dear. These are troubled times, are they not?
Aye. Child are turning against sire. Inquisition in the streets.
Well, thank you for your cheerful news, Argyle.
I don't mean to be the bearer of bad tidings, but if I can pass along a bit of useful information, I try. Here's another tip for you. If you've any contacts within the common class, you might try and do your best to vouchsafe for them.
Argyle, do I appear to you as someone who associates much with the common class?
You seem to me as someone who might not cast aside a useful tool simply because it's dirty.
The commoners and the peasants are the concerns of the priors, and, well, I mean you no offense, but, well, the low clans. It's not my place.
Aye. But how do you get a shipment of grain from here to Scotland without commoners?
There will always be commoners.
Who mends your pants? Who sews your skirts? Who cleans your homes? Tends to your parties and whatnot?
She kind of waves a weak wrist at the air. I cannot for such things. But they happen.
Where's your herd come from, Cecilia?
I'm unfortunately not privileged enough to have a herd, and so I dine where I may, amidst those with fine appetites and luxurious taste.
See, there's the turn that I was looking for. Maybe don't write off the commoners and you'd have a herd to call on.
And catch some venereal disease, I'm sure.
Not if you're careful. Not if you tend to them right. Keep them healthy. Look after them.
This sounds the job of a steward. I have no interest in such things.
Well, then I hope you enjoy dining from the table of others. He'll stand and leave her with that.
She seems to have no reply immediately, but lets you go.
Does Hitchcock still seem to be engaged?
No, it seems like whoever he was talking to is departing now.
And then he will go and seek out interaction, extending a hand in front of him to shake.
He pauses for just a couple moments beyond etiquette before shaking your hand and smiles politely. Argyle, is it?
You ought to remember, we did bleed together.
Yes, that is right. I apologize, my boy. It's been quite a bit on my mind.
I'm glad I'm not the only one drawing those parallels.
It has been very busy in this city, you see. Many questions from the young ones.
And quite a lot to observe from a lofty perch.
Not too lofty. I do continue to engage the discourse and discussion, as always, but we must be more careful of where and when we have these discussions.
Whichever lofty perch the order was given from to call in these inquisitors. If you happen to know someone who knows someone who can whisper in that ear, you might tell them to get a leash on this dog.
I have concern that time may have come and gone, my friend. Now is not the time to whisper uncertain words into weary ears.
If they want a second uprising, this is how they'll get a second uprising.
I mean only that even the patricians are careful with how much they pull the leash of their kind. Many are on guard these nights.
As well they should be. But someone has the Queen's ear.
Yes, I'm aware.
And it seems that someone who has that ear caught wind of the commoners taking issue.
Lord Barbaros is well poised to change things, although I wonder if he has the desire to leverage that contact. He has much to lose and perhaps little to gain.
That braggart. Just can't see past the tip of his own nose.
I can understand his perspective. Not that I agree with it, but I do understand it.
He is the Queen's ear. There's no way he came to this conclusion himself.
I doubt that any of us could have predicted what would happen in York, or that it would spark what has sparked once it was unleashed.
Even the mastermind behind that plot didn't expect this.
And who do you attribute the mastermind of this plot to be?
Well, to hear Ellen tell it, it was Robert himself.
Lord de Vere. Had the occasion to meet him a couple of years past here in the city. He kind of looks off in thought. I would not have taken him to be a mastermind of such plans. Are you certain no one else placed this idea in his mind, or perhaps aligned the stars, as it were?
Oh, I'm sure there's more to the story than I've got. But that's all I've been told so far. Of course, Ragnar got her revenge in the end. Whether or not she lived to tell the tale, I'm not sure.
Yes. There has been no report from any of my contacts that Ragnar has been seen since. Tragic. She was formidable.
I wouldn't write her off just yet. She's quite a vicious one. I'm sure if there was a way out, she found it.
In any case, it seems to have destabilized the entire British Isles for all of us. What once was 7 is now 4.
I wonder, at least insofar as London is concerned, I had a notion. Thought I'd lay before you.
Please, continue.
You know, I know a few folks here and there. I had an interesting conversation with a gentleman you introduced me to down by the docks. Seems like peasants are no longer trusting each other. There's no village to raise the children. People keep mostly to themselves. I wonder if we might nudge that particular scale back in the other direction.
He kind of closes his eyes briefly. I wish it were as simple, and even a year ago, it might have been. But now, my boy, things are so thin and precarious. I cannot blame the kind for how they act, how they isolate. It's regrettable, but our intervention is what begot all of this. Further intervention, many would argue, is only more dangerous.
I'm not saying we ought to put weapons in their hands or any such fool thing as that, but maybe foster a more tight-knit community, one that knows its own neighbours, trusts them, values them. Perhaps, a spring fair.
There is a school of thought developing quickly amidst those that I have these debates with, that now is a time for our kind to return to the shadows, to leave the kind to their workings, for whatever good or ill end, that our intervention has come to this boiling point. Perhaps better to wait until the smoke clears before we muddle the waters again.
But a touch here, a coin there, a shared meal between neighbours. What harm can happen?
It is precisely what we said for decades, and yet here we are.
For decades we've been toying with those above. Everyone jockeying for a position to see who can get their paws on the highest crown in the land. I'm not talking about moving armies. I'm talking about building bridges.
And I am talking about going to ground, my boy. As benevolent as your intentions are, as mundane as they are, any more of our kind brought into the sun adds decades to how long this will be.
But if we make the wholesale slaughter of commoners something that the nobles fear, that's a different matter entirely. You make the Inquisition the least popular idea to discuss in the land, it goes away on its own.
I admire your fashion, Arga. I always have. Although, on this, we may disagree on the philosophy of what to do with the kind. I am firmly of the mind that we have meddled for far too long, and that it is time for us to leave the kind. I'm not sure for how long.
He'll point off towards the neonates. And what about them?
I say the same to those of the young age who come to me for advice.
Aye, but they don't have the resources or the experience to go to ground. They still have to feed on the streets every night.
It is a dangerous time for us all. We all must make sacrifices. There is no purely good or wise choice. This is simply the one that I have arrived to.
For whatever it's worth, the black eye you caught from the last uprising, you didn't earn. It wasn't deserved.
He gives you a half smile.
But if you're not gonna do something to make the city safer, hell, these islands safer for the younger, I'll do it without you.
You will do what you feel is necessary. And I commend you and encourage you always to think on these options. For it is when we stop considering other possibilities that we truly begin to become the beast.
You have a pleasant evening, Hitchcock.
He bowed.
He'll bow a little bit deeper in deference and meander off. Just kind of observe the rest of the people here for a little while.
As I said, some you recognize, some you do not. You would know Simone Deschamps, who always keeps to herself as much as possible, finding a corner of the ballroom where she can see everyone coming. She seems to be watching just as vigilantly as you. Helena Nosferatu keeps Bella's company, taking her cues of when to laugh and when to become more stern. You don't recall when this other individual with a great bushy beard and a hat arrived, but he seems to command some status. A number of younger Canaanites come up to him. He seems to be directing or have some kind of influence. Perhaps he's the new seneschal. There are a couple other faces you don't recognize. The neonates you see are fewer in number than you recall. Many keep to themselves in hushed conspiratorial discussions. Does Argyle intend to remain there for most of the rest of the night?
Unless someone approaches him directly.
Okay. And for now, we will leave Argyle in Elysium, watching the Canaanites come and go. And returning to Elenid's Manor, elsewhere in London. Elenid, as well as Nicholas and Katya, you're all, I believe, under the same roof now, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. There will be a bit of downtime coming up. Oh, there will be a couple scenes sprinkled in over the next month. Elenid, you have not yet presented to Ambrose. That will be one visit we will play out. I imagine you'll be taking at least Katya with you.
I will be taking the people that I vouched for to get into the city with me, yes.
Okay. And does that also include Desjardins?
Robert's child?
Yes.
Yes, he needs to present himself as well. Not doing so would reflect badly on Nicholas.
Who claimed him in the last session? Was it you or Nicholas?
It was Nicholas.
It was Nicholas. Okay. So you know you have that meeting coming up. What else are all of your plans for next month? For each of you?
Well, she needs to finalize and notarize her will should something happen.
Okay, you'll certainly have enough time to set down your study with quill and ink as needed. Consider that done.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else come to mind?
Training, sending a letter up to the Anarchs, which she will not personally do. Someone else, she needs to get someone else to do that.
Okay, find a proxy. And how about Nicholas? What are his plans for this month?
A whole month, that's going to be rough. Since he pretty much has to rely on the kindness of his friends to get fed.
Yes, feeding is not going to be easy for anyone, but for Nicholas it'll be especially difficult.
Yeah, he's going to have to be very careful, so he's going to lie low. Other than being introduced to Ambrose that he's back in the city, he will not make any waves. Perhaps spend time in quiet study.
Okay. And Katya.
After meeting with Prince Ambrose, Katya's concern will be to watch the clergy, hidden by obfuscate, of course. Maybe follow patrols around and see how they carry out their investigations. Get a feel for what they're looking for, the signs that make them pick out witches or heretics or whatever they deem worthy of burning.
Okay. To be investigating the witch hunting.
Yes.
Okay.
Without investigate as a knowledge.
That'll make it
I don't know if
harder.
that wrench. Okay.
I've never considered investigation a true knowledge, so I will let you try without it.
Fair enough.
Anything else come to mind?
She'll avoid Elysium for now, so I think not. No, this will be her main concern.
Okay. And Argyle, your night is not necessarily done just yet, but what are your plans going forward in general?
In general, his primary focus is going to be shifting public perception amongst the commoners. Trying to use my influence dots to turn public opinion sour as far as the Inquisitors are concerned.
Okay. Sounds reasonable. So, Argyle, you spend much of the night watching Elysium unbothered. It is near the end of the night when you are beckoned forward by Bella Matea. Not necessarily by herself, it seems like one of her hangers-on comes to you and invites you to come sit with them, if you accept.
He's not going to turn her down. He's not that dumb. He has just enough etiquette, just enough political knowledge to know that's a dumb idea, so he's going to go over.
All right. So you come over and you see that Bella Matea is smiling pleasantly enough as you come and sit down.
Well, good evening to me.
She smiles warmly. Good evening to me. You took the words right out of my mouth.
It's more my pleasure than yours, I expect.
I've seen your face, but your name escapes me.
He'll extend a hand. Argyle. McAuliffe.
She takes it gingerly, very lightly. Argyle.
He will take her hand very gently in his own, and unless she jerks it away, he'll bend down and kiss her knuckle lightly.
Make an appearance etiquette roll for that.
Yup.
Difficulty 7.
Ouch. Bear in mind, I only have 3 dice for this.
Yeah. One success. It's not the most practiced, but it's
Doesn't go amiss.
No, it's a good, humble attempt. The effort was there, and it's recognized. And you can see that in her eyes as her eyelids lower at you, satisfied. Aren't you the one that was supposed to have been involved in a couple rebellions, something of a peasants' rebellion?
A bit of a footnote at best.
And now you return here, on the eve of what seems like another. It becomes something of a herald of unrest.
My sire used to say we have a nose for it.
Your clan is known for it. I saw you speaking with Hitchcock earlier. I hope he did not bore you too much.
He's a good fella. Perhaps not the same man I knew, but his heart's in the right place at the very worst.
He and his club of philosophers are more words than action, at least these nights.
I've got a damn sight more to lose now than then, isn't it?
Don't we all? I'd heard that Ragamuffin Ridley was seen back in town in the company of someone big and burly. That wouldn't have happened to have been you, would it?
Aye, that would have been me. I found him and the Gauntlet Lady up York way. They were kind enough to offer a boon to see him safely home.
You were there, in York, when they departed.
Aye, I happened to be in the north. Poor timing. For me, anyway.
I've heard very little from those who were actually in the area when it happened. Did you see anything?
York Castle burning. Bunch of bodies in the streets. Basically was all over but the counting when I got there.
Your castle burning. Can only imagine. I've heard a couple of reports from deserters, knights who were there. I relish the details. Not that I had any venom for dear Ragnar, but I must occupy myself somehow.
Well, I can recount what I've been told, but it's all second hand. If that's good enough for you.
I'm always keen on hearing stories from abroad.
I've been known to spin a few yarns here and there.
And she seems to sit back and rest her arm on the armrest, getting comfortable.
Argyle, I don't want to like drag this out crazy a lot, but he would recount what details were shared with him on the road, including the giant worm dragon thing, and Ragna making it out alive last anyone saw.
Her eyes widen briefly at that detail, as that is not something she had heard from any deserters. No one had seen or knew what happened to Ragna, officially. At the end of your story, she seems to sit up with more attention. Quite the show. I regret slightly I was not there to see it, though I imagine perhaps I would regret being there if I were.
I don't know that you'd be still around to regret it.
Well, if Ragna could not take that heat, I doubt I could. Do you intend to stay long?
Oh, I might. There's a few matters piqued my interest.
Well, do watch the streets as you stroll them. It's not quite as welcome as the city used to be.
Oh, I know. You know, used to be, you and I had a few circles of influence that overlapped here and there.
You think I do not anymore?
No, I just hadn't been in the city for a while. Don't know if perhaps your interests have moved on. I know mine had, but I still know a person here and there.
For people in my position, contacts are everything, my dear.
I said very much the same thing to young neonate over there. He'll jerk his chin in the direction of that coterie.
The neonates have much to learn in many places.
Aye. So do some elders.
Likely so, though you won't hear me saying that openly.
Hell, I have the benefit of people already thinking ill of me. At least in some homes, some havens.
I'm also afraid that all this activity has put a damper on my parties. I am hopeful that this will blow over, so I may return to the gallows as I please, but history suggests that is not likely.
Perhaps we shift history a bit.
Go on.
I'd mentioned something to Hitchcock. He dismissed it out of hand. But it seems to me the peasants are scared because they don't know their neighbours. There's no sense of camaraderie between them. Where I grew up, your clan was everything. Whether that meant your brother, your cousin, your third cousin's second wife and his 2 children, it didn't matter. You lived together, you worked together, you bled together. I think perhaps London could use a bit of that.
You want to rebuild the community in this dour, overpopulated city.
I think perhaps if the peasants were united and saw each other as kin, I don't think the clergy and their footmen would be quite as willing to press that advantage.
It's a thought.
And if one or two folk happen to stand up in the midst of a neighbourly dinner to voice a displeasure at some friend of a friend who was dragged into the street and beaten, maybe that spark catches fire.
I imagine you didn't ask me about my contacts, so you could speak on this without an interest in them.
What happens to the lowest of the kind directly affects me and mine. And what directly affects me and mine eventually affects those with, shall we say, softer couches to lounge upon.
She smirks. It's certainly an idea. One that I will consider.
And perhaps a spring fair to cap it off.
Perhaps. We will have to see what the weather brings us.
Aye. We'd need to take the baby's temperature to see how it's growing. Might be it's a sickly thing, just needs to be put down. But it might be it's a hale, hearty young thing.
She nods once.
It's always been a pleasure, Lady Bella.
I have no doubt that, with or without my help, someone of your reputation will make some waves in this city.
Hopefully for the better.
One other thing, my fine Scottish stallion. Ridley and I are having a bit of a tiff. Until he apologizes for his rudeness, he won't find many welcome faces in this city. I see wisdom beneath all that brawn. I trust you'll avoid getting in the middle or helping him find a meal.
Well, so long as you don't mind me passing on your request.
He knows where to find me.
I doubt there's many of us in this city that don't.
She smiles. Good evening, Argyle.
Better now. But he'll rise, give a little bow, and then make for the door.
All right. You depart.
Unless someone stops him.
You are not stopped. It is later in the evening now. Late enough that perhaps even Elenid, Nicholas, and Katya would have made their way to court for presentation. Does Argyle intend to be presented tonight or another night?
If he knew plans were to meet at court, he would have made sure to be
Elened
present
would have
with the rest.
sought him out.
Okay. Perfect.
All the while being a sneaky snake, since the hunters know what she looks like vaguely.
You're an Ancilla. You can send a messenger. It's fine.
That segues nicely for us. Give me one moment. Alright, Katya, Nicholas, Elenid. Later on in the night, after Elenid's had time to work on her will, you decide to get this presentation over and done with. You make sure that Albert Desjardins is not too far, so that he can be presented as well. And so you make your way over to the Westminster Palace and descend into St. Mary's Undercroft. You see the Sheriff, Cash. He seems to be speaking with a couple neonates, clad always in his armor, kind of plate cuirass and chain. He shoos away the neonates when he sees the group of you approach together. Evening.
Good evening to you as well.
Argyle will just kind of jerk his chin in Cash's direction. Cash?
He nods to you respectfully. Quite a group of infamous Kainites.
Argyle will grin, perhaps showing a few too many teeth in the process.
And one we thought were gone. We are fortunate that you made it, Lady Elenid.
Fortunate, but with poor news.
He looks confused.
Namely, exactly what was able to cause that attack.
I suspect you'll be wanting to speak with the prince for this.
If possible. I imagine he is rather busy these nights.
Very, but for a group this esteemed, I will ensure he is aware. He bows quickly and turns, moving to the back of the Undercroft, disappearing, and a number of minutes later he returns at a good pace, a good walking pace, and you see Ambrose stepping out behind him.
Elenid will curtsy, as always, to show respect towards him.
He steps out, stopping at the dais. It seems each time you arrive at this court, another of your faction has fallen. Now we have but one gauntlet lord.
That is unfortunate, but yes.
You I know, he says, gesturing to Argyle. Who are these two? Pointing to Katya and Albert.
Well, Katya here is a Malkavian, and apparently her visions told her where to wait along the road in order to run into us.
Katya performs a curtsy.
And the fellow down there. That would be Robert's child.
I've heard some concerning reports about his child. And Robert himself.
I will admit that if the concerning reports are what they think they are, it is likely based in fact, though I know not if the same can be said for his child. I have scarcely spent time with him. Outside of travel, that is.
Desjardins seems wide-eyed and already pale in the face. He seems even more pale. He stands, it seems like he's shivering, although you know there's no need for it. A relic of his living days. I understand he is a fledgling.
Indeed.
Kincaid reported that Mr. Nicholas Ridley spoke for this one.
It is true, my lord, and he will bow.
What concern do you have with Robert's whelp?
I see within him the lines of fate stretching out into a dark pit. He will follow me to the precipice of whatever comes.
The words of your clan rarely make sense to me, so long as you accept responsibility for him.
That leads me to something else, my lord. An indulgence, if you care to grant it.
He waits, staring at you, unblinking.
Surely word has reached your ears by now about the feud between myself and your harpy Belamatea. I am not allowed to feed in the city until I apologize. I do not think the same fate should befall this neonate.
I had heard words that the harpy bore ill will to you. I've heard of no words of this boy.
Indeed, it would seem she seeks to supplant even your own authority. She did, after all, say the city was hers at heart.
Argyle would surreptitiously gesture for Nicholas to perhaps, well, I don't know how he's going to, never mind. Forget I said anything.
Words said in anger, I'm sure.
Did she now? That is good to hear. Long has the harpy had her leash quite lax. Perhaps I shall tighten it. But that is a personal matter which I will attend to at my own time. I would hear of this one's significance, and his eyes lay upon Katya. Kincaid spoke of something concerning a vision regarding the usurpers.
That is correct, my lord. I have spent some time in Norvik, and I have learned much of the place. There are indeed usurpers within.
If you hail from Norwich, give me a reason why I should not chain you to the wall and have you tortured for information.
Because I have come freely to offer such information.
Perhaps you come to freely offer me disinformation, lies from the Norwich prince. Perhaps I will pull what I need from you.
I beg not. I have not been in the city long enough to get any real ties. These isles themselves are very new to me.
So you claim. What say you, Lady Verkingen? Last remaining Gauntlet Lord, elected by the Covenant Council. Do you vouch for this creature?
Her information, if true, could be of use. For that sake, I will.
Very well. I expect you to keep a close eye on our guests from Norwich.
I shall.
I do not want it long or far spread that one from their city has entered ours. Keep that information to yourself.
Understood.
Katya nods in acknowledgement.
So long as Verkingen believes you are useful, I will not spear you to a wall. There are other matters which you must consider, Lady Elenid, for there is a council meeting to happen in the next month.
I understand.
There are several topics which you must give consideration to. The first is how we navigate Barbaros. Now that the war is ended between he and Ragnar, Kincaid and I are in agreement that we must parley, but the others may disagree. Secondly, we must conclude what will happen to York. It is ruins now.
May I speak? Apologies for speaking out of turn, but, what comes of York is, incredibly important considering there could still be, Methuselah under there.
You believe the old one to be there still?
Last I saw him, he was burrowing under the ground in order to put the flames that are on him out. It is possible he could still be under the castle. If not, he could have gone elsewhere. I know he is old enough to transform himself into a rather large serpent-like dragon.
The ancients of our kind are said to have powers beyond our reckoning or imagining. It is as likely that he is there as anywhere else in this world. My hope is that if all that has reported is true, Ragnar was his only concern. Perhaps York will have some rest now. And given enough decades, it may recover, as I expect it to. Which means it will need a new prince. And that prince will need to be supported by the Covenant. We must also consider how we are approaching Norwich now. With the loss of Ragnar's forces, we are severely crippled. If Barbaros reconciles, we may join him. If not, we may need to act quickly against Norwich before they have time to fortify and build forces. The last matter to consider is this resurgence of the church. I've been in brief correspondence. Some among us think best to act against Norwich before this gets even worse. Others claim we should stay hidden and quiet, avoid activity, let this witch hunt come and go like the tide rising and falling, without our involvement.
Argyle will raise a hand for a moment.
He looks to you.
It seems to me if the Queen called in the Grand Inquisitor, someone put that thought in her head. And from what I understand, the only person with the Queen's ear is Barbaros. I wonder, are Lincoln and Canterbury or Bristol experiencing the same resurgence of the church?
Canterbury, I have not heard word from. Octavia says that things are under control. Lincoln has more unrest, though London seems to have the greatest effect. It is also the greatest in population. While I agree it is very possible Barbaros was the author of this Inquisition through his contacts, it is equally likely that with the egregious events in York, an Inquisition was inevitable, and calling one was the best option before it was called without request. My concern is that if we wait too long for this Inquisition to leave, the Anarchs may revolt. Without progress, Norwick may fortify, or do worse, a more insidious infiltration. If we act too quickly, we may all yet see the sun.
Of an eye towards precisely solving that particular problem.
His eyes go back to Alanid. These are the considerations I would have you reflect on in this time before our meeting. With the lack of Covenant Council members, we will look to you to break some of these ties and decisions. I suggest you confer with those you trust most in Council on what recommendations you would have. The fate of the Covenant and the Cainites in the British Isles may depend on our next move.
Understood.
I will leave you to these reflections then. There is other business I must attend to before the new year.
Of course.
He turns away from you, and his cloak billows out as he is followed by his sheriff. And they exit at the end of St. Mary's Undercroft. Leaving the four of you alone in court, at least for now.
Well then, that's over and done with.
Oh, seems like it might be just the beginning.
Yes, a beginning. But
I
where
was
do we go from here?
referencing the abductions, not towards any philosophical meaning.
I know what you meant.
Desjardins seems to loosen up. Oh, is he always so serious?
Pretty much. I've not known him to smile very often. I think it might break his face.
I thought I was going to fall when he looked at me.
He might have done better too. throw yourself at his feet and beg for clemency.
They're very severe on that one.
It sounds as though much is dependent upon this meeting. What will you do? He says, looking to the group of you.
That is a discussion you will not be part of.
Right, of course.
There's much you need to learn before even considering having you part of things that important.
Well, I'll be walking off back to the manor then. Get some air. I suppose I don't need that anymore, but it feels good.
Do be careful.
And be aware, for now, you can only feed in the rack.
He nods a couple times. He raises his hood and makes his way back down the stone columns you passed, ascending the wooden staircase back up. And then it is just the group of you.
Suppose you'll be having me fuck off then too, the.
You already know what these matters are. It is more he has much more growing to do before I could consider him to say anything rational on the topic.
And here I was thinking you sent him away because you didn't trust him.
Well, there's that as well.
A bloke like that already had his mind scrambled by the likes of Ragnar and who knows who else.
Well, it seems they still remain. Of course, it seems my life is also not your pleasure.
That it is. But I did uphold my end of the bargain.
And I thank you for that. If there is anything I can assist with, please let me know.
I will keep this in mind.
Nicholas, what do you plan on doing the rest of these nights?
Staying well out of the way, I should think. I do believe I have created quite a stir.
Hey, you might get to Bilamatea before Ambrose shortens her leash. Else she might think there was some nefarious motive behind his taking exception to her particular demeanor.
Why should she believe that the prince would take the word of a lowly Malkavian?
Because who else would have reason to utter such things?
I was only telling the truth.
She won't see it that way, and you know that.
I'm not going to apologize to her.
Kahraf. Go ahead.
She deserved everything I said and more to boot.
Kahraf at the knees, tie one arm behind her back. She's still as formidable as anyone in this room.
I have no doubt of that. She's made it impossible for me to feed.
Hey. And I'm telling you, she could do worse.
So can I.
Even from a short chain being held by Ambrose.
I do not think our short time together has given me cause to lend great credence to your advice. If you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend.
Argyle will just shrug. Advice is free.
Elenid, good evening.
Good evening to you as well.
Katya.
Do be safe.
He will turn on his heels and depart the hall. Hands behind his back, head held high.
All right, Nicholas departs.
You're welcome to keep your own counsel, but I've seen a thing or two on these isles myself. I'm happy to share what experience has taught and the perspective it's granted me.
It's likely he hears you. You know how perceptive he is.
He was
But-
speaking to Alanid, but that's fine too.
Oh, okay, well, in that case, never mind.
Yes, hearing your opinion is something that I like to hear on these matters. Considering how much you enjoy going against the grain with your opinions.
I don't know that I necessarily ruffle feathers for the sake of it, but I speak my mind and I don't give much of a rat's fuck. Who cares?
There's only a slim difference between those two things.
Aye. One's deliberate.
Well then, I have matters I must attend to as well.
He'll shrug. As you like.
And she will go off back to her manor to set about doing things.
Argyle will also go out and see about sowing some seeds himself.
Argyle, do you mind if I travel with you?
That depends. You might sour the milk a bit.
I suspect I would were I seen. They have much to learn of this city.
He'll shrug a bit then. Do as you like.
Very good.
Alright. So Argyle takes off, not back to the manor, but into the streets to perhaps change some minds, and Katya following behind Argyle, obfuscated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think the scene will close here, and we'll take a little bit of an early break. And that's a good transition. And we'll come back around the top of the hour to pick it up.
Okay.
Alright, so returning to London, December 1456. A few people are doing a few things. Argyle intends on swaying the populace to build community and build some resistance to this growing witch hunt. Argyle, describe to me what it looks like in your attempts to build up this community and this resistance.
He'd mostly be meeting with people where they are, going to them rather than drawing anyone in. So taverns, pubs, working class establishments, things like that. And mostly just pointing out this growing separation between people and their peers, and the distrust being sowed by this witch hunt. It's fostering more disunity than anything else. People really should be breaking bread together and looking after one another.
And Katya staying to the shadows, watching how Argyle progresses.
At least for a good bit. She's not going to dedicate a majority of her time, but she wants to get a certain feel for how he works and the message he is putting out there.
Yeah, and then you want to watch the Inquisitors themselves.
Yes.
Alright, Argyle, give me a charisma, empathy roll, standard difficulty. This will be your roll for the month.
So can I roll contacts to lower difficulty?
Thinking... Yes, I will let you lower your difficulty by 1 with your contacts.
That also works.
Not per contact, but...
Right. I mean, that's fair. It's basically saying, here's your 1 success for having 2 contacts. That's better than I might normally expect on a roll like that. My other request would be, can I add my influence dots and use leadership instead of empathy?
You can add your influence dots to your roll. You want to do leadership instead of empathy?
Yes. I mean, technically they're the same dice pool regardless. Just leadership feels more appropriate.
Mechanically, it's just kind of arguing semantics. The reason I chose empathy was that you're just imploring people to their better nature, to have more sympathy to their neighbor, as opposed to trying to... If you were going to try and rally them to a militia or build something more organized, then I'd say leadership, but that's why I chose empathy.
fair enough. Yeah, that comes later.
Yeah. So yes, charisma, empathy, add your influence, and difficulty 5 because of your contacts.
And I'm gonna put willpower into this because it suits his nature.
Go for it. All right, 3 successes. That is definitely a full success, full completion. So over this month, you find people where they congregate most, taverns, inns, sometimes the stalls where people are taking stuff down or working late, just talking to them about how bad things are going and getting to give a second thought to their neighbors and how they can help and how they can strengthen themselves by being more than lone houses in the night. And you actually get a pretty good reception. Your words pierce hearts, and over this time, you will notice that people are speaking to each other more. People are walking in groups more. There is definitely a sense of slowly building community that is becoming noticeable to everyone in the Coterie, really. If you stop to look around, the crowds you see are less ones and twos off by themselves, and you see more people going to places together and doing things together and speaking with each other. It's certainly livened up the community a bit. So Katya, you see that Argyle does have some success in the way he speaks to people and how he operates. Your other intent to follow the clergy, these priests and their enforcers, are you just staying obfuscated and following them and just seeing what happens?
For a good amount of the, I guess, first half of it, should also want to get a good look at their faces and such. Thinking of ways to further that, but if anyone, if they actually find anyone, drag them out to the street and make a public display of it, she will actively look at disguising herself and use a little bit of imitation to manipulate their humors and make them more violent and rageful. That is a thing she will seek to do.
So you wanna make the guards more wrathful when they inflict punishment?
Yes, I want them to be more brutal, certainly.
Alright. So first, just to track on the priests themselves, let me look at your sheet and remind myself of your various conditions. Okay. Give me a... I was gonna say wits investigation. You don't have any investigation, so just straight wits, difficulty 7.
Okay, spending a willpower on this one.
Alright, 1 success with your willpower. You get a little bit of information on how they operate. Basically, you can tell they take tips from the community, They often persecute women who are said to be witches or suspected to be witches by their neighbors. And there's little more ceremony or evidence gathering than going into places where they think there might be a witch, dragging them out and questioning them in the streets. And depending on how they answer, usually it ends with someone being burned at the stake, or hung, or dragged through the streets of the Tower of London. This rarely goes well for people once the doors have been breached. And you don't really get a good look at faces. You're not sure if there's a pattern to who's doing what, or if there's always someone who is in command. But if you want to make it even more brutal, you can do that. Let me look at this. I think I deleted my dementation handout. Which one are you going for?
Incubus humor.
Incubus humor.
That is manipulation plus sympathy against the target's or willpower for mortals.
Alright. So roll your manipulation empathy. Your target here will be 3. I remember vaguely how this power works. Wow, 6 successes. As I recall, the successes impacted duration.
Yes.
How long is 6 successes on that chart?
3 months.
3 months.
Okay, well. You are following the guards on one of these nights. You think maybe it's one of the more savage guards already, just kind of based on his appearance, kind of an unkept facial hair, a look in his eyes. He's not very well spoken, doesn't say much, just kind of got a mean look to him, and you pick him. And they go out and they, you think, heard a rumor from someone in the neighborhood, in one of the slums, that some man was seen speaking a hex to somebody else in church, a rival, perhaps. Maybe somebody doesn't like. And so you're going there to investigate. It begins as uncivilly as it usually does. There's no knock. The door is just kind of pushed open. The guards, including this one guard you're following, go in. They shove the man to the ground. The church, or rather the priest in charge, begins asking him about what he knows about demonology and curses, and what curses he's spoken recently. His guilt is assumed quite readily, as his belongings are pulled out of drawers and other guards lift up his bed to look for things, and the priest isn't done actually asking his questions by the time this guard just turns, and you can see him just huff, and his shoulders go up and tense, and he drops what he's holding and grabs the man and picks him up and starts slamming him against the bedpost, just slamming his face into the wood of the bedpost. And the priest actually doesn't say much about it. The other guards seem to take note at how angry the man suddenly got. He crushes the man's skull against the wood of this bedpost before he's even done questioning anything. And there is a brief silence as the dark room of this very poor little cottage that was already fairly run down and worthless is now have a large pool of blood splatter across the walls, a pooling collection of viscera and skull pieces and brain matter mixed into the hay that was covering the dirt floor. This place was already dirty and pathetic, and now it's just covered in blood and grime. And after a couple seconds of this, the priest just looks to the man. Try to control yourself, I wasn't done. Let us leave. The guards drop whatever they were looking at. One of them searches the man's pockets, pulls out a couple pence, and they leave. The door is left open. A small amount of light pours in, reflecting on the blood inside. And you are there to witness all of it.
Taking advantage of this opportunity, the items that the guards were looking at, what were they in particular?
Nothing really. There was a cheap linen pillow that was being emptied out and cut open. There was a small wooden dresser that was being opened and plain white tunics pulled out. There was a Bible, although the front piece of the cover was actually missing, and that was being searched through. Just whatever meager possessions this man possessed, they were manhandling.
And is there much of a crowd? Well, I'm wondering if she reasonably believes she can maybe take a few of the items that the guards handled and maybe a bit of vitae from the still fresh corpse.
Yeah, the guards are just leaving now, and no one wants to get near the man who's obviously still angered. He's easily identifiable in this group of guards following the priest as he looks fiercely from one person to the next, as though waiting for someone to say anything to him or give him any reason at all to just strike them. And so no one is eager to go near him or where he came from.
All right. This is a start. How much vitae could she salvage from the body?
I'm gonna say, given how much was wasted from this man's head being bashed in, about 5 points, if you're quick.
She won't need nearly that much. She's going to top off. Maybe it's been about 2 nights, so maybe 2 points of blood. And she will escape with a few of the items. Well, maybe the pillow casing and a few items that they handled, and call it that.
Okay, you can do that. I am going to come back to Elenid and Nicholas as they return to Elenid's manor. And actually, Elenid, as you're stepping up to the doorway, you can see Gertrude already at the door. The door's partly open as she's speaking to some man through the doorway. It looks like a man dressed like a rider you would expect, with a riding cloak. You can see the end of a sheath coming out at the end of his cloak. And he seems to be speaking to Gertrude. They seem to be in fairly calm tones right now when you approach.
Are there any other entrances to the house?
Yes, there's an entrance in the back from a garden.
She will take the back entrance.
All right. What does Nicholas do when he sees this happen?
Does he have any reason to be alarmed? Just looks like a courier, right?
Looks like a courier, some kind, yeah, or a rider.
He's gonna step aside and obfuscate himself. Get closer and listen to what they're talking. Since clearly Ellen is alerted to something.
Alright. Following the shadows of the walls, you creep around to the wall just near the entrance, and you can get a better hear of the conversation. You hear Gertrude's voice speak up. Well, not now. She's out. I do not know when she'll be returning. Well, I have very strict instructions not to leave until I have spoken with the Lady Elenid. It is important. I have news and a relay from Mr. Sardini. I'm sorry, I do not know who that is. I cannot let you in the house at this time. This kind of goes back and forth with him insisting that he has to relay this message or he can't go back, and Gertrude not willing to let him in.
Alright, the Nicholas will wait. Although if the man gets unruly, he might step in.
No, he seems quite calm, but resolute. So you wait. Elenid, you make your way in through a winding passage at the back. You have to kind of climb over a metal piked garden gate, and you make your way into the back. The back entrance is actually open to you, or rather unlocked, and so you make your way in to the manor from there. And should you want to, you can wind back to the foyer towards Gertrude.
She shall, if only to try to listen in.
And you hear much the same.
After mention of the name Sardini, she will enter the room.
Yeah, he's not actually in the foyer, he's outside, and she's kind of speaking through a partly open door. But once you become at least visible, the man whom you see is fairly slim, but has a very identifiable, long, large, old wound, like a jagged scar down his cheek, on his right cheek. His eyes widen briefly. Lady Elenid, if you don't mind, I have a message for you.
Let him in long enough for him to tell it.
This will not take long. Mr. Sardini of Lincoln sent me. A man you met a couple of years back. Mrs. Sardini would like to know if you and your companions will be available to meet the Lady of Lincoln in several nights from now, when she arrives in London. The lady has a proposition that she would like to discuss in person.
Greeting the prince is an act that brings about a great amount of... Yes, I shall.
He nods and withdraws from his cloak a very small, rolled up little scroll and hands it to you. This is the address of the salon which she is intending to attend. She invites you to present that evening in 3 nights.
Of course.
I shall relay to her that you intend to arrive.
Safe travels.
He bows deeply and turns sharply. pulling his cloak tightly about him. And of course, Nicholas, you're here to hear. You are present to hear all of this. Not far away. If you're talking, you're muted.
Sorry, were you directing something at me?
No, that was to Nicholas and Elened.
Ah.
Well, Hal and Ed will open the scroll and see exactly where this meeting place is.
It's actually...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
You're just continuing to listen right now.
The scroll is an address not very far from here. It's definitely an upscale neighborhood. The house you're going to, you think if you know the address right, it's very nice. It could be possibly the second manor of a baron, perhaps. Someone of some esteem.
So with that, she will tuck the letter away and turn to Gertrude. How comes the progress on the tenement building?
Oh, it is nearly complete, my lady.
Excellent.
It should be done by New Year.
That is good to hear.
Begging your pardon, miss, I could not help but notice, your other companions, they seem to be missing.
Yes, 2 of them went for a walk. Nicholas said he was returning here.
I more meant, Lord de Vere and, Miss Talisia.
Oh. Talisia met her end. It is unfortunate, but is one of the risks. And Robert, it is said he also met his end, but he only met his end after being betrayed.
That is tragic. It seems many of your companions have fallen. I trust you will
Indeed
be
it will.
safe on the road.
I shall be safe, yes.
She looks anxious, but nods a couple of times.
So long as I keep a low profile, it should not be a problem.
She nods and offers a forced smile before turning back to her duties. You suspect she was folding laundry, as that's nearby.
Elened will return to his study to continue drafting the will.
Okay. And Nicholas stays outside?
He'll come in once the messenger is gone and everything is clear.
Alright. Elenid, do you tell anyone else about your message?
Nicholas.
He'll ask, what was that about?
That was a messenger from the child of the Prince of Lincoln. Apparently the Prince of Lincoln will be visiting in a few days and wishes to meet with me. Apparently she has an offer.
Now, what could the Prince of Lincoln want from you?
That is the question. I know she and my great uncle are at odds. Though whether or not she knows of my relation to him is an entirely different matter. I suspect she does.
It must be important. The messenger was quite insistent. He would not leave without speaking with you.
It must be, yes. And to turn it down would be seen as a slight against her.
Then that settles it. You must see her.
Indeed. If you wish to come along, you may, but if you have a business elsewhere, you are free to do that as well.
I'm quite certain the invitation was only for you.
Most likely, but it wouldn't be the first time I've dragged other people into invitations that were only meant to be for one person.
Sorry if I either misspoke or didn't include it. He did say, or meant to say, Elenid and her companions.
And scratch that. No, it mentioned companions.
In that case, I'm afraid curiosity has gotten the better of me. I don't have much else to do, what with the current state of affairs. I had considered making my face known in Elysium. Rubbing the dog's nose in it, so to speak.
That could prove amusing. And getting on the good side of another prince certainly can't hurt your situation.
The more allies I have, the better. They must be cultivated like rare plants.
Though, I did have an amusing thought. The personality the Prince of Lincoln has would likely grate very, very badly with Argyles.
This prince, is he a salty sort?
She is extremely full of herself and has the power and backing to be so. Says one thing to your face, but behind your back is doing something entirely different.
That is clearly something I am used to. But Argyle is a bit more earthy.
If nothing else, it could serve as amusement. She did ask for my companions, after all.
As always, I defer to you in this.
Now, with this devious plan in tow, whenever she sees the other two, they're getting roped in on the... But until then, she will work on her will.
All right. So, Nicholas, you know about the intent or the invitation to this meeting, and is this also shared with Katya and Argo?
She did ask for my other companions. They are my companions as of the moment.
Okay. So you all know about this invitation, supposedly meeting with the Prince of Lincoln in a few nights. Is anyone intending on not going?
Few nights. Katya will go.
Arga can probably squeeze it in.
Alright, now here comes the hard part. In past nights, I didn't test for blood, as I assumed any Ansela worth his salt or her salt could hunt, given enough time and without really any difficulty, but these are not normal nights, so you might not get any blood in the next 3 nights. You might end up at this party a bit hungry. So I'll need rolls from everyone for your hunting in whatever way you choose. So we will start with Elenid. How are you hunting over the next couple nights?
The tenement buildings are cleared out at night, correct?
The one you were fixing up?
Yes, the one I am fixing.
No, it's inhabited. It's just being kind of restored and updated.
Then she will use Blush of Health, make her rounds, see if there's anyone there that needs anything for her to assist in these troubled times. Of course, Nicholas is free to come along if he so chooses. Build up her rapport with them so she can potentially feed on them at some point.
Blush of Health. So you're going to spend a blood point?
Yes.
Okay.
Look human.
That will help you in blending in. And building rapport, just give me a charisma expression. And since it's effectively your domain, and you've gone to the trouble of making yourself more human, I'll make this difficulty 5. You aren't facing the same difficulties everyone else is with dodging patrols or things like that. You have a little bit more advantage here. Wow.
Oh boy, no specialty. My specialty is in poetry. That does not apply. I'm not a wandering person doing rap
Wandering
battles.
poet. 6 successes. Yeah, you're living on easy street. Everyone else is struggling to find.
I said that Nicholas can come along.
If this is her domain, that means she makes the choice on it, right? So I can't get really in trouble.
Exactly.
This is true.
So he will take advantage, profusely thanking her more than he's ever showed any emotion. He was worried he was going to starve.
Yes, so there are, I will say, effectively 6 blood points worth of good hunting without causing anyone any health issues or drawing attention that you can divide between the two of you.
Only need 2.
Then Nicholas would gladly take the other 4 to fill himself up.
Alright, there you go. Get a little help from your friends.
He owes her, though he won't say it.
Alright, that saves you a very hard roll, Nicholas, which you do not have to make anymore. We'll go to...
She-
Go ahead.
I just feel a little bit bad she couldn't procure food for the others, but one is as much as she was confident in bringing along.
Yeah, bringing too many would definitely start to risk the health of the patrons, or the residents, I should say. We will go to Katya next. How are you hunting? And where? There are places easier to hunt than others, but not having domain there makes it much riskier.
Well, she's got it in her mind that actually following the trail of death these patrolmen are leaving could be beneficial.
Could be. If you don't mind feeding on the dead, you don't mind risking being seen feeding on the dead.
She knows how to stay hidden.
Okay. I won't need any more rolls to make anyone go off the handle and beat someone to death. You're pretty good at that. The beatings will continue, and the bodies will continue. What I will need from you is you keeping your wits about you, not getting too egregious with feeding on these bodies, because you have to act fast. As soon as these bodies are dead, you have to feed on them while the blood is warm, and you're not going to spit it up because it's so disgusting. Dead blood is not as good or nourishing as live blood. So I will have you make a wits stealth roll. Your difficulty here will be 7, and whatever successes you get will be halved because you're feeding on the dead, and that will be how much blood you get.
Okay.
Any specialties here?
Negative.
Okay. I'll let you... It's 1 success, so I'll let you round up. You get 1 blood point. It's not very efficient hunting off of the dead that are left behind. You have to be careful not to be seen. What's left behind isn't that good or nourishing. You can't feed for that long. It's rough. And you only get really a blood point's worth after several nights.
How many nights?
3. So you are down 2.
9.
Okay, Argyle, how are you hunting?
Argyle's going to take a very similar approach to what he used in Bristol. That seemed fairly effective. Looking for ruffians and the sort that are up to no good or generally trying to do harm. Basically putting a stop to that.
All right.
He'd probably focus around... I don't want to say the rack, because that's probably going to be well patrolled.
Many places are well patrolled.
Right. But I figure the rack more than others.
You certainly get broken into more.
So he'd steer more towards market areas, places where the clergy is probably not going to be breaking into homes because there's not very many homes there.
All right, so market areas like storefronts or stalls.
Right. Places where ruffians might be waiting to assail a shopkeeper going home late at night.
Okay, that makes sense. And I will say you're smart enough to know that certainly someone must claim this as domain. It's profitable land. You don't know who, but you know it's not free.
He'll cough up a bonus he has to.
All right. Give me a... What did we make the roll last time?
I think we did wits alertness
It was definitely wits something. Let me look.
or wits survival.
That sounds more likely. Because there's no real streetwise right now. Yeah, give me a wits survival. Difficulty here will be 8.
Oof.
Hunting in London is not easy right now.
I was looking for an easier way. Gracious.
Unless you have heard, there are no easy ways. Or domain in Ellen's case. Although she can't draw on that small group for too long. Any specialties there?
Sadly, no.
Alright. One success. It is very difficult. In the process, you do find someone who's obviously looking to, he's eyeing one of these merchants who's working late into the evening, and you do manage to subdue him before he gets to the merchant, but he struggles a lot more. You end up having to expend blood just to get him under control, and you end up netting only 1 blood point. So you will also lose 2 by the night of the meeting.
Hey, it's not a botch. I'm happy with it.
It's not a botch, which would have gone poorly. Alright, so several nights pass. Some of you fare better than others. And it is the night of the meeting. So, and I'm assuming that Desjardins is told to stay at home with Gertrude, maybe like babysitting him.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I expected. So the 4 of you then leave on this 3rd night, and you really aren't going that very far, maybe a quarter mile further down the street. You are still in a very nice neighborhood. You end up at a very posh home, just outside London's walls, barely outside. And it looks like there is some kind of gala being held here The building you arrive at is a decadent two-story affair with an overlooking balcony, paved tile courtyard, fountain, and there's a small line of pairs, men and women, dressed very finely, gentry, aristocrats, maybe even some lesser nobility. They're arriving in pairs, kind of being stopped by the attendant. There's also a guard nearby with a halberd, although he's kind of off to the distance near the door. And all of them are wearing these kind of faux masquerade masks. It must be some kind of masquerade gala or party of some kind. There's also a nearby hedge garden kind of decorating the exterior of this estate. You get in to the line, which passes relatively easily, although without masquerade masks or looking the part. You are stopped by the attendant as he kind of looks at each of you in turn. Who are you here to see?
We have come to see Lady Neverley. She has sent an invite to us.
He looks around to see who else might be nearby, and then kind of looks to you and in a lower tone. Around the back.
She nods.
And he kind of gestures very faintly with his hand to the left, where you see a stone trail goes from the courtyard to this hedge garden, and it leads on from there.
Then she will go around that way.
Following the path, you pass through the hedge garden and eventually arrive at a back room. You can kind of hear faintly the activity from inside, the serving of probably meals, glasses, plates, a low hum of activity. There's certainly a gala inside, but the room you eventually arrive at, the door, is actually of kind of a study with large glass walls that look out into the garden. And the door is open for you when you reach this back study. And at least Elenid would recognize this individual as Colton Sardini, the child and attendant to Eden Everly. Ah, Lady Elenid, it is a pleasure to see you again.
Pleasure to see you again as well.
Please, do come inside and find a seat.
She shall.
He holds the door open as you all enter. There's very fine velvet rugs and portraits hanging from the walls on the inside, although almost half the room is mostly glass, which just gives you a very scenic green view of the outside. There's a desk with a couple of books on it, a large bookshelf with books of various subjects, most modern theories on herbalism and alchemy. There's also a low-set circular table where Colton starts pouring out drinks. And whom do I have the pleasure of introducing my lady to? I see you've changed companions since we last met.
Yes, unfortunately, my previous ones have not survived it to these nights.
Oh, unfortunate. I am honored to make your acquaintance. I am Master Colton Sardini. And he bows to the group of you. Looking to each of you in turn, first looking to Argyle.
Argyle hits him with a fairly harshly appraising gaze. And just jerks his chin up in the man's direction. If no one else speaks, then he'll give his name. Argyle McAuliffe. Can't say I've heard of your name before.
Ah, so you are the Argyle I've heard of. Yes, you've made a bit of reputation on these isles. Well, Lady Everly will be pleased to hear of this. And the two of you, I do not believe I've met either of you. He's looking to Katya and Nicholas.
Nicholas will bow. Nicholas Ridley of Bristol.
Katya will curtsy. I am known as Katya.
Yes, Katya. Cannot say I've heard anything about you, but Mr. Ridley, I have heard details. Are you the same Mr. Ridley which is said to have uncovered much of the plot of our friends in Norwich?
If you're referring to the affair with Prince Sebastian, then yes, that is I.
His grin widens. I thought as much. Yes, yes. Lady Everly will be very pleased to meet a mind such as yours. We had hoped that this might be the case when we heard of a similar person in Elenid's company. I will let the Lady of Lincoln know that you've arrived. Do help yourself to these refreshments. He smiles as he backs out of the study through two double wooden doors and closes them behind him, giving you maybe a minute or two to confer before she arrives.
He has not changed at all.
Argyle is not one to look a gift horse in the mouth. He'll go ahead and partake.
As will Katya.
Alright, you may enjoy an additional blood point as you happily enjoy the resources of Lady Eden Everly.
Only one?
Yes.
Elened will take her goblet over to them, and she already has her method of
Feeding the hungry.
indeed.
You are too kind.
I'll remind myself of the paths you guys are on.
Katya is definitely going to partake in this. And since it's 2 points, efficient digestion comes into play. Extra blood point.
Alright, you got it. It is only maybe a few minutes later before the double wooden doors open again, and there's a brief increase in the noise as the echo of some distant laughter and the chatter of the party somewhere nearby, further into the manor, enters the room as you see a woman enter in a very fine black and silver masquerade ball, holding up a small masquerade mask with a stick, which she lowers. The mask shows Eden Everly, the Prince of Lincoln. A woman with a apparently young face, though curiously silver white hair and very stunning yellow eyes. She smiles as she enters and closes the door behind her. Ah, do forgive my tardiness, and thank you for joining me.
It was our pleasure to meet with you. And she does curtsy, as is common for her, as she enters in order to show proper respects.
She nods to you as she enters further into the room and finds a seat in a large crimson armchair on the opposite side of where you all sit. Lady Versingen, I must offer my condolences for your lost companions. Many gauntlet lords that I once spoke to seem to have been gone.
Indeed. It is unfortunate.
Mr. Sardini did me the service of informing me of our illustrious guests. I am pleased you brought them. And her eyes kind of go across each of you. There is an intent behind her eyes, although it is not clear what. It is interest. I apologize for the proxies, and prefer that we keep this meeting discreet.
Of course.
As you all know, the politics of this island have been changing. The loss of Ragnar, Barbaros being off the deep end, and our dear Sebastian having shown his true colors. As the newest member of the council, I find myself uneasy with the ground beneath me.
That is understandable.
The loss of Ragnar was a terrible blow to the council. I will be mourning her loss for quite some time. But we must also think of the opportunity which arises in her fall. And she waits, letting that sink in. Her eyes sitting more heavily on Nicholas.
Yes, there's an open position for a city that has been ruined by one much more potent in blood than I.
Yes, I had heard the stories. I'm sure it must have been a terrible ordeal. And yet you survived, which is a testament to your will. York may be a ruin right now. However, in the decades to come, it will persevere. It will return. York has been sacked in the past. It always comes back.
My concern is that there's the possibility that said Methuselah will be sleeping under there. It is possible that he may have moved on in pursuit of Ragna further after she fled, but last I saw of him, he was retreating into the ground beneath the castle.
Indeed, there is some threat there. But they claim many castles are haunted. They claim many villages are doomed for some sign or omen. I would not cast York's aside so quickly because this Methuselah may or may not be beneath the castle. The city is far too valuable to ignore.
Aye. I know Ragnar had no few viceroys beneath her that might want to stake their own claim.
Indeed, many will want to stake the claim over York. I expect it to be a decade, perhaps two, before it is returned to its near strength. But at that time, the competition for praxis will be most sharp. As well, Norwick, I expect, will change hands soon. Now you see, my friends, there is much opportunity here in the coming years for cunning friends to shape the political climate as they will. Indeed, as a council member of the Covenant, I would hold some influence on who might be nominated for praxis. Of course, only the Covenant has the power to allow one to hold a city as esteemed as Norwick or York. And so here we are, at a bit of a crossroads. Whom am I to nominate? Whom am I to consider when these years pass?
I don't think we have any information on anyone other than the Durham Viceroy, as far as people in York, now that I think about it. At least not that's still alive.
Yeah, if you want to make an intelligence politics, you could probably reveal more of that topic. Let's say difficulty 6.
Versus...
For those of you interested. Alright, 1 from Argyle, 3 from Elenid.
There'll be nothing for me. I don't have politics.
Okay.
I have politics, but I don't think Katia would know anything about it.
Yeah, that's fair to your character. It is unlikely that Katya would really know. Although you could still roll to have an idea about the process and threats therein, if you wanted.
Fair enough. Was it intelligence?
Politics standard.
Okay.
Let you get that roll. Four successes. Alright, so Argyle with 1 success. You don't really know of anyone else except possibly the Viceroy Anselmus, but you heard he was dead. The Durham Viceroy would be the obvious choice, stepping into the role. Elenid, you make those same you and Katya would both kind of deduce that local Canaanites, in Ellen's case, she knows that it would probably be Eve Cavanon of Durham, would be the obvious choice, although you both also know that technically anyone can claim Praxis. Anyone could be a threat. Any elder that wanted to step in and claim the domain as their own, if they had the backing and the influence, they could be a contender.
Well, as far as local Canaanites go, there's Eve Kavanaugh. However, to completely rule out those that are coming from different sources would be a drastic oversight.
Very true. And here I sit. Sorry, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Would Argyle be familiar with Broga Ironbend?
I'm going to say probably not with that roll. With one, because I would have you roll the same thing, intelligence, politics. I'll let you roll again, actually, since that's a different topic. I mean, you weren't really thinking about him if you want to try again. Okay, 3 successes. Actually, yes, you have heard of the Viceroy in Carlisle, Broga Ironbend, under the liege Barbaros and his fiefdom. You're aware of him.
What about Broga? He's fair. He's got the time, he's got the influence. He knows how to deal near the borderlands. Wouldn't be much for him to shift his influence from one side of the aisle to the other.
Her smile
And
fades into a grimace.
And it would get him out from underneath the thumb of Barbaros.
Which, by giving him a greater opportunity, could gain the ire of Barbaros more than we already have.
Could be that. But Barbaros is short-sighted at best. He'd be angry at a gnat for squirming in his eyes.
The relationship between Broga Ironbend and Barbaros is quite sanguine. I would imagine this would strengthen the relationship and give Barbaros a powerful ally, if that is your plan.
Might be that. Might be Broga's chomping at the bit to be out from underneath a, we'll say, overzealous overlord.
Well, I've spoken with them both. I do not think that he has such resentment as you think.
And I don't think a sitting viceroy would tell you that, or waste any effort in concealing it.
I believe we're getting away from the more obvious solution. I sit across a table from multiple notable Canaanites. Elined Versinghan herself, the war veteran, Gauntlet Lord, survivor of many dangers. Or Argyle, the wise and well-traveled legend whom all know of. Or Mr. Ridley, acclaimed with unveiling the secrets of Basileus, identifying the Covenant's true threat in Norwich. And you, whatever the hell you are supposed to be.
I figured that was what we were getting at.
I have no intention of falling into the fires of the Inquisition. I intend to be around for many centuries. And that means finding allies who see eye to eye. If any of you expect to see the same length of time, you'd be wise to consider this idea.
Argyle makes a show of stroking his beard. But you're but one vote among 4 or 5, depending on whether or not Barbaros is there. Weighty to be sure, but there's 3 others, possibly more, that would need to be convinced.
Well, she will glance over at Nicholas. It is a rather amusing thought, is it not?
A sobering one.
I can be very persuasive, should the time come, and we will know long ahead what other targets or sponsors or potential candidates might be. I have quite a bit of experience in reducing the status of those I choose, or elevating them. And let me tell you this, my friends, opportunity does not come with these chances often. You must strike at those which present themselves, as I did.
I won't say it's not a tempting offer, but I have neither the experience nor the resources to hold the city. He'll shift a bit and glance at Elnid. Now, if someone be needing a sheriff, that's a role I could fill.
Or seneschal.
You needn't commit any answer to me now, tonight. There are nights yet to pass. Though do consider it.
It is something that is best deliberated, I believe.
Yes, there is much to deliberate on before the meeting in January. I thank you all for coming and entertaining my ideas. She rises from her seat. I bid you all a good evening, then, and safe travels. I expect we'll see each other soon.
I certainly hope so. And she will give her one last curtsy as she's leaving.
Try not to get caught by those witch hunters in the meantime. She smiles and raises up the masquerade mask again before departing.
That's not exactly the seed I expected to have sown. But it does present an interesting question.
That is not what I expected either. I expected a different type of plot. She will turn to leave. She is not going to speak here. She doesn't know who is listening in.
All right. So you all depart.
Yep.
Yes.
So you return maybe almost an hour later, back at Elenid's manor, with thoughts of the future, perhaps.
As they get inside, Elenid's actually smiling a bit, genuinely smiling. She is amused. She glances over her head necklace again. Can you imagine the look on Bella's face if you were elected to that position?
There's two questions I think need to be spoken loud before anyone entertains any further deliberation on this.
I'm aware there are things that need to be deliberated. Like if this is a ploy for her to find out who we back, in order to undermine them in favor of her own candidate.
No. You're one vote of many. Assuming there were a tie in the first place.
Indeed, I am a voter.
No. I think she was quite direct when she said she was hoping to foster an ally. But what would she want in return?
That is the question.
It's no minor boon she's after. Having a second Covenant prince who's favourably disposed towards you. That's not nothing. Second, and here's the more important bit, do you even have the means and the resources to hold a city like York without the support of the viceroys around it?
No, I do not.
Do you have the means to foster that support?
Unfortunately, I am not the most political person out there.
Hey, I think you're selling yourself short a bit there. You've sway and at least positive rapport with 3 or 4 Covenant princes. That's no mean feat, politically speaking. And with the right support around you, it might cost you a few bones here and there, but a foundation could be laid. Hell, for the asking, I'd put a good word in with McDougal.
I doubt the votes will go that far north.
No. But he might be relied upon to send men and supplies for rebuilding.
It is something to consider.
Could probably get away with a moderate boon. Again, a moderate boon from a sitting Covenant Prince is not a small thing.
No, it is not, but it is also what our society is based on.
Precisely. There's an old saying, never trust a Canaanite with no debt.
Is that really a saying?
It is now.
Nicholas, long-suffering, narrows his eyes slightly.
And if it's not, it should be.
I suppose. Though, personal favorite saying of mine is every bird relishes their own voice.
Aye, and I've known no few birds who like to speak. Either figuratively or literally. But entertain it for a moment. What steps would you take to hold a city like York?
There would be income that would have to be secured.
Aye,
The
you'd need to
favor
sign.
of the nobles to be gained.
Well, the Duke of York is no longer has a regent. Domain would need to be assigned. You can't watch over it all.
Of course.
You'd need to reach out to Lady Kavanaugh.
Yes. And on the mortal side of things, to bring people back, we would need to make things suitable for the working class.
Aye. I might know a few folk could make a mean feat of that. So you've got more resources at your disposal than you think. It's just a matter of taking stock of them.
Indeed.
York's still a port town. It's still got a sizable trade. No small amount of tradespeople to work it.
Means I would have to go out of my way to learn trade routes.
Or find someone who already knows them.
Fair.
Think of it like leading an army. You don't ask the general to know every single operation within it. The general doesn't dig trenches, the general doesn't maintain latrines, the general doesn't sharpen weapons. It's up to the general to find those skilled enough to handle those tasks and assigns them appropriately.
It is something that could happen.
I think before you more seriously consider it, you might get word to Lady Kavanaugh. Let her know what your mind is considering. If you have her backing, you might make a go of it.
I could definitely try.
So it seems. The biggest rival for this claim. Is it Eve Kavanaugh?
It is her, yes.
I think
Or
it
real
would be,
quick. Go ahead.
I think it would be good to know more about this one. Go ahead.
I don't remember what I was about to say. She's Trimer, if I remember. Not exactly given to seeking out positions of power unless it's foisted upon them.
Especially not when they are so. When the clan isn't exactly trusted. And the Tremere themselves like to hold themselves up for research, which is something I am not a stranger to.
If this one is indeed an usurper, perhaps it is best to figure out where they stand.
Indeed.
Or, since the viceroyalty of York would be transferred directly to whoever holds praxis, find out after the fact.
If that is the case, it would be best to establish a good relationship early.
Though if I do take the position, it will mean the tensions with Barbaros will likely continue. I am assured that he is not exactly pleased with me.
Aye, but at least he doesn't have a blood feud going back hundreds of years with you.
Not yet, at least.
What if this Ragnar comes back?
Then that is a bridge that will be crossed when it happens. As it stands, once another person is elected, she can't exactly walk in and try to claim the throne.
No. I expect she'd have to raise an appeal with the Covenant as a whole. The smart thing would be to wait for the Council to resolve it. Or simply abdicate in her preference rather than challenge it. Or there is another option.
Go on, then.
Well, that really just depends on how cheeky you like to be. And he does, in fact, sport a cheeky smile of his own.
I'm waiting to hear what this says.
What was the name of the leader of that anarch revolt?
Ellen Alice.
Aye, that's the one.
She would certainly enjoy it the most. Though they already asked for Norwick once that is resolved.
Aye, it seems to resolve several problems all in one. The anarchs are quelled. York has leadership that's well equipped to deal with its intricacies. Doesn't solve Barbaros, but it definitely resolves any question about their loyalty.
It would also make peace talks with them easier. However, they wish to be independent of the Covenant, and the Covenant wants that to remain a Covenant.
I didn't say it didn't create other problems. There's no perfect solution to this. But there are ways that dinna exactly hurt.
It is something to consider.
Though, if you're of a mind to vote for any of them, I'd recommend sending a messenger. Either to Everly to let her know you're taking her up on her offer, or to one of the others so they know what to expect.
Is this something that you're seriously considering?
Potentially. I'm at least entertaining the idea.
If you do this, you must be certain. There is no turning back.
I understand. However, I already know someone who has the resources to hold it. Though how willing he would be is a different story. Furthermore, he is not exactly known for being kind.
Since when was a kindness a requirement of praxis?
This is true.
No. I think you've 4 options, and I've laid them on the table for you.
There is also the option of seizing Norwick. It is, at the moment, uncontested, for obvious reasons.
Yes.
And be damned with the anarchs.
To my knowledge, Sebastian still holds Norwick.
Still holds it, yes, but he is not recognized as one of the princes.
True. But he's still there.
He's still
Unseating a
there, and his influence is still there.
And unseating a prince is a damn sight harder than installing a new one.
Certainly the Covenant would see the necessity of it, and lend their forces in aid.
Unless we strike this deal with Barbaros, we have no chance of it. Unless we seek aid from other sources. But that will take much more time.
Be that as it may, you've more than enough time to think on it. Well, maybe not enough. For whatever it's worth, if you decide to take Eden at her word, have a good sword and a strong arm to wield it, and it's yours for the asking.
I will keep that in mind.
My aid is where you can rely on. I have tied my fate to yours. Whether or not I meant to.
And of course, it would be beneficial to support you in this endeavor, I think. You can count on me.
Though most of this relies on if the Norwick is going to be struck against sooner rather than later. If sooner, then that's when my attention is going to be directed.
In my position as your advisor, Eleanor, I must also caution you on allying too closely to such a new prince. If what you say of this Eden Emily is true, she won't have time to have, how shall I say, entrenched support.
Indeed.
This kind of coup might be enough to unseat her, much less make you a prince in the meantime. I'm not saying don't try. Just be wary of the consequence.
I'm very aware of the consequences of aligning myself with her. She is, well, rather ambitious and extremely ruthless.
Those qualities could also be of benefit to you, if we are to examine all sides.
Suppose they could.
Although if what she intends to install is a puppet beholden to her, she doesn't know you very well.
Considering I did not go along with her child's plot the first time we met, I think she already knows I would not be a good candidate to be a puppet.
Then she must hope she'll get something else out of it.
Aye, you'd owe her.
Indeed. Exactly what she would call upon is yet to be seen. It would be something rather substantial considering the favor she offered.
I suppose we'll have to cross that bridge when it stretches before us.
For now, I believe that most of what can be said on the matter has been said.
I cannot disagree. There are too many variables.
And with that, she will retire to her study.
All right. So you depart. The coterie is left with their thoughts of not just how to handle Elenid's potential praxis, but also what recommendation will be made at the council meeting about the church. What will be recommended about Barbaros, or how to deal with Norwick. All of these considerations go through each of your mind. The scene will fade on the study, and we will end the session here and pick it up again next week.